Thank you so much for coming to the SDP's GE2024 campaign launch. We're so happy to have all of you here. So just a quick rundown of the event of the day. We'll be opening with a welcome speech from Dr. Paul Tambaya, and then that will be followed up by Dr. Chee Soon Juan, our Secretary General, who will then take us through some of the key issues that the party will be focusing on this election. And then we will be discussing issues pertaining to the changing socio-political landscape and where the SDP stands in this new shifting environment of trends and forces. So with no further ado, let me welcome SDP Chairman, Dr. Paul Tambaya.
Thanks very much, Min. So dear friends, members and change makers, it's great to welcome you to our GE campaign launch for 2024. Okay, thank you. I'm not sure how many of you were here for the February 2019 campaign launch of the Mandarin. Hands up. All too shy. I definitely saw some of you all. That was a memorable event for many reasons, even before it started. Some of you may remember that the venue which we had originally booked accepted our deposit, cancelled on us at the last minute. And it was only quick thinking by Jocelyn that managed to get us to hold the event as planned at the Mandarin Orchard. The original host apologized profusely to us and refunded our deposit. But this is something that unfortunately we quite commonly experience, and not just the SDP, but all the alternative parties in Singapore. So this year we avoided the problem of somebody cancelling on us at the last minute or charging us some extravagant charge if they didn't actually reject us for having the event here. And it looks like we're just about enough place for everybody. There is some room around the sides if you want to come in. Anyway, we had a great event in February 2019, and we're going to have an even better one today. The good news for those of you who are there is that we only have 2 speeches and 1 panel. In 2019, we had 6 speeches. Okay? But if you want to hear more from us, I'm sure you've got plenty of opportunities to do that. So many of you will ask about the timing of this event. Well, our GE 2020 campaign launch was held in February 2019, 17 months and 1 pandemic before the actual election. The SDP are a serious political party, and we take our responsibilities as an alternative voice for Singaporeans very seriously. We know that to mount a credible campaign, we need time to mobilize volunteers, update our policies, prepare our social media strategies, walk the ground, get to know the residents, which is especially important if we aim to win the constituency and manage the town council. Now, getting visibility in a constituency is especially hard in Singapore because we are a close second to the United States as champions of gerrymandering. As academic Alvin Ong pointed out recently, under the current electoral system, the gap between the number of votes won and the number of seats held has progressively widened. Since 1968, when the PAP won 87% of the vote, got 100% of the seats, all the way up to 2020, when they only won 61% of the vote and got 89% of the seats. The only political system which comes close to this is the one which invented gerrymandering, the US Congress, where apparently 94.5% of incumbents get re-elected. I mean, that's incredible. We have been told the Election Boundaries Review Committee has not yet been formed, but we don't know when they will be formed or what are their specific terms of reference. In fact, the size of constituencies seems to be rather random and arbitrary. For example, Potong Pasir has got 18,551 voters, whereas Bukit Panjang SMC is almost twice as many, with 35,258. The one thing that we do know is that a new returning officer has been appointed for the next general election. According to the Straits Times, he was previously the Deputy Secretary of the Ministry of Law, at a time when any Singaporean could ask him for a list of high-end government rental properties that were not advertised in any public website. So it sounds like he's a very helpful person, and hopefully the election boundaries process will be more transparent this time around. I sense a bit of skepticism in this room, and that's partly why we need such a long lead time, as there's no way of knowing which constituencies will disappear and which will remain, which will merge or which will be divided. Historically, constituencies where the PAP has won less than 55% of the vote tend to disappear, such as Joo-Chiat or Chengshan. However, that's not always the case all the time, so we have to plan for all eventualities. We also began planning for this event a long time ago, so it had nothing to do with the change of PMship, which was suddenly announced last month. We wish Mr. Lawrence Wong all the very best. In fact, I had a nice conversation with him some time ago at a scientific meeting where he was guest of honor. And I discovered he did his undergraduate studies at the University of Wisconsin, where I did my postgraduate work, although our times did not overlap. We reminisced over what is probably the world's best ice cream, made in Bascom Hall, near the dairy school. But however, like most Singaporeans, actually, I think most of us wish we knew more about his politics than his guitar playing skills. But time will tell. Some interesting insights, though, did come recently from an interview that Mr. Wong gave to The Economist, a magazine that is apparently not a favorite of his cabinet colleague, the law minister. In it, Mr. Wong is quoted as saying, "We welcome foreign professionals to work in Singapore, but it is controlled. Because if it is not controlled, I think we will be easily swamped. We cannot afford to be like the UAE, where the local residents are only less than 10% of the population." Now, we agree with the first part of this statement, in that we welcome people who are committed to contributing to Singapore, but we do not believe that the immigration in Singapore is appropriately controlled right now. Now, let me make this very clear. We are not against foreigners coming into Singapore. In fact, we have a detailed SDP immigration policy which welcomes talented foreigners who have ties to Singapore and are willing to contribute. What we are against is the cynical exploitation of foreign workers, low-wage foreign workers, brought in because the primary talent they have is the ability to do the same job as Singaporeans but for lower wages. The Prime Minister recently spoke of jobs that Singaporeans are willing to do, and he cited construction as an example. Now, I recently returned from a trip to the UK, and we walked past some massive construction projects in the London Docklands. What impressed me was how few workers there were, but how many machines there were. All the workers appeared to be local and well equipped to man the machines, so they would go around just turning on the machines and monitoring them. In Singapore, in contrast, because there is no minimum wage for any worker, local or foreign, companies have no incentive to mechanize when they can employ cheap foreign workers. Thus, our productivity is way below what other high-income countries have achieved in the construction and marine sectors, for example. We achieve profits through risking the lives of workers who come here to earn a decent living, allowing employers to transport them in lorries without seat belts, and perpetuating the cycle of low-tech, low-productivity construction, which is obviously not sustainable. When salaries and working conditions are decent, Singaporeans will not shy away from hard work. Just recently, a private bus company offered a starting salary of $5,000 a month, and apparently there were 1,292 applicants for 10 places. Most of them were Singaporeans. At the other end of the foreign worker spectrum, we are quite appalled that the PAP seems to have such a little faith in our schools that they feel that after 65 years of running our education system, we can no longer produce men and women of the caliber of Goh Keng Swee, J.Y.M. Pillay, Elizabeth Sam, etc. And we have to depend on so-called foreign talent to fill top spots in our banks and corporate world. Here again, the SDP has a policy, our education policy, which offers creative solutions to the failures and gaps in our educational system, which have led to this dependence on foreign talent. Now, during the last GE, some of you will remember, our slogan was 4 yes and 1 no. During the campaign itself, we finally got the PAP to deny that they had a target of 10 million people. After this number had been bandied about at various forums, most prominently by former HDB Chief Architect Mr. Liu Tai Ke. It had never been formally denied until we and others, including I think Meng Seng who's here, brought it up during GE 2020. Despite this disclaimer, the population in Singapore has relentlessly risen, not by an increase in births, but by the massive importation of new citizens and permanent residents. This has put a tremendous strain on our infrastructure, as anyone who has ever taken the MRT during rush hour can tell you. One of our national centers of excellence in healthcare has replied to a forum letter in April 22nd this year by pointing out that for non-urgent or non-site-threatening referrals from primary healthcare providers, a 9-month wait for a specialist review is sometimes the case. As far as I can recall, this was not the case many years ago when our population was much more manageable. And unfortunately, it's going to get worse. The same is true in housing, transport, and all the other elements which contribute to our quality of life. Now, in this modern world where robots and artificial intelligence will be doing most of our work, or so we are told, it's hard to understand the need for so many people on our tiny island. In addition, Singapore has been described as one of the world's fastest aging societies. Now, this is unfortunately due to misguided PAP population policies. We have among the fastest growing populations in ASEAN, but it's not from more births and fewer deaths, but rather from more imports of 20, 40, and 60-year-olds. While, as I mentioned earlier, we value individuals who can contribute to Singapore or have close family ties, an unchecked influx of people who are going to require medical care a few years after arrival will put a significant strain on our resources and could unfairly disadvantage our own teenagers by placing an additional burden on them. Now, the SDP has a suite of policies which address these issues, not just population, but also housing, healthcare, education, the Malay community, etc. Ironically, many of these have been adapted and adopted by the PAP, but in a watered-down form. A clear example of this is the SDP's healthcare plan, which called for universal healthcare for everyone in Singapore. At that time, MediShield had significant limitations and did not cover diabetes or other pre-existing medical conditions. After we published our healthcare policy, and to be fair, many others took up this issue, the government introduced MediShield Life, which is an improvement on MediShield. However, because of its high deductibles and annual limits, it still does not cover the vast majority of subsidized hospital bills, nor does it cover the cost of very expensive drugs for rare diseases. As we are not in Parliament, we're not able to keep pressing the PAP to explain why they only took the form of a universal healthcare plan without the substance. Another example that's coming up is what we proposed during GE2020, retrenchment insurance paid through the CPF. It looks like my friend and classmate Tan Si Leng is still working on this, but they are caught in their dependence on the Skills Future program, which apparently only a minority of Singaporeans have benefited from. I would appeal to Si Leng to take a good look at our 2020 manifesto and see what he can learn, and to the voters to make sure that you get us, a few of us, into the next Parliament so that a retrenchment insurance scheme that really benefits Singaporeans can be implemented, rather than some watered down version that sounds good but is not going to be able to deliver the goods for Singapore families. Lastly, I want to speak to our change makers and members here. We really appreciate your hard work over the years, organizing events, visiting the blogs, posting on social media, etc. We appeal to you to bring your friends along as we get closer to the GE. Don't be afraid of POFMA. We were the first victims of POFMA, which celebrated its 5th anniversary earlier this week. We took the case all the way to the Court of Appeal, and it became clearly apparent that it's a very bad law. Now, I'm not a lawyer, but my understanding is that you do not have to actually say anything which is untrue. But if someone interprets what you say to be something which is not true, then you cannot defend yourself. You have to put up a notice saying that you said something false, even though it may be true in the context you intended it to be. Now, if that's confusing, believe me, it is. That's apparently what the multiple meanings rule means about interpretation. So let me just quote to you from the public version of the Court of Appeal judgment on our case. It said, on the balance of probabilities, an appreciable segment or a particular class of the SDP article's potential audience would have interpreted the relevant sentence in the SDP article as referring to a rising number as opposed to a rising proportion of Singapore PMETs getting retrenched. So, they depend on what they think the public is going to interpret from your statement, regardless of what you think you wanted to say. The other problem with POFMA seems to be its entirely arbitrary nature. Now, Wake Up Singapore was misled by an individual who doctored evidence and told them a tall story. Once they found out, they withdrew the report and issued an apology. They were still served with a POFMA and now face criminal defamation charges. In contrast, the newspaper of record made a false statement about Workers' Party, which they withdrew, but as far as I know, they were not subject to a POFMA or a criminal defamation charge. Not that I would wish that on them, but I think that the message is that POFMA really doesn't have very much credibility as a measure of truth or accuracy. In fact, some people would view it as a badge of honor to be viewed as a credible threat by the ruling party, and thus worthy of a POFMA. I think I've talked too much. Okay? You came here to see what we have to offer and to hear about our plans for the campaign to help bring about a more democratic Singapore. I'm going to hand you over to our Secretary General, Dr. Chee Soon-Juan, who will give you a more detailed insight into our campaign and our approach. So in the meantime, thank you once again for coming and wishing us all the best for the next GE. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for taking time out today on this Saturday afternoon. It's hot and humid. It seems that PAP is not the only oppressive entity here we have in Singapore. But I know that many of you here, especially those of you who have been assigned to cover this event, have a million other places you'd rather be. And just to make your time here as worthwhile, as rewarding and exciting as possible, I'll come straight to the point and get to the subject of our core campaign message that we are going to carry into with us this election. This is going to be, as I said, the first that we've packaged and everything for you, as far as the media is concerned. We're going to be building up on it, repeating it, and hopefully be able to get it through to the Singaporean public that this is what we're going to be campaigning on. It didn't come from just out of the blue. We didn't pluck it up from thin air. It took years for us of listening to the people, getting to the ground, doing our own research, reviewing all the surveys, all the newspaper reports, and then be able to bring everything together into a coherent whole, into a cogent whole, and hopefully that will be something, an effective message that we can continue to pursue. So let me cut to the chase. The campaign message hangs on one issue: foreign workers. Now, before you start screaming xenophobia, anti-immigrant, let me assure you that what I'm about to tell you, the substance of our policy, the background to it, I'm going to cite to you PAP, ministers, establishment folks, and newspaper companies, news agencies, from which many of you here belong. And we'll go through some of these issues and analysis, and then I'll take you through what we're going to be doing, proposing from our standpoint. On these foreign workers, we're going to, I don't know if people over there can see. Do you want me to shift this side? Can you just crane your head a little bit and then up? Just see if we can. Now, these are the four issues. The first is productivity. I'm going to take you through each and every one in turn. Then you have the cost of living, inequality. There's a bit of a mix-up over there. Okay, and then there's national identity. Okay, let's get on to productivity first. Mr. Lee Hsien Loong, in Today newspaper in 2015, said productivity growth only way forward to ensure better life. I emphasize on the word only. In that same interview article, he went on to say the Republic has maxed out the easy ways. The Republic has maxed out the easy ways of driving economic growth, and the only way forward is to increase productivity. Okay? Then he said that productivity is very tough to do. How tough is it to increase productivity growth? Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, when he was alive, said in 2010 that we've grown in the last 5 years by just importing labor. And experts, economists, have all told us, right, that cheap foreign labor is one of the dampeners of productivity growth. Okay? And here you have Mr. Lee Kuan Yew telling us that 5 years ago, you're talking about 2000s, turn of the millennium, that our economy has grown in the last 5 years just by importing labor. A few years later, you cannot see this, it's beneath the screen here. In 2015, Mr. Lim Hin Kiang, who I believe was the Minister of Trade and Industry then, admitted that the Republic was not achieving the 2 to 3% labor productivity growth rate that we are aiming for. So we're already in trouble by that time. Now this is an article that was written by economist Tham Yin Yi of the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy, where she said, Singapore fueled its impressive economic growth primarily through attracting foreign capital and importing foreign workers, and not increasing productivity. This strategy has now run into diminishing returns, and this was published in 2019. Okay? Another study that was published by economists Manu Bhaskaran and Nigel Chell, and this was in 2020. It says that Singapore's productivity growth has underperformed below what is needed to keep improving our living standards. So there you go. You have the Prime Minister, or soon to be former Prime Minister, telling us that without productivity growth, our quality of life cannot improve. And the only way that productivity growth can take place, take place, is through productivity gains. And here you have had, year after year, where our productivity growth has been less than impressive. Let me then turn to what Deputy Prime Minister, or at least at that time, he was Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister, and he said in 2012, our increasing dependence on foreign workers is not sustainable. We must therefore take further measures to reduce the inflow of foreign workers. I want you to note this point because I'll come back to it in a minute. Okay? Again, Mr. Lee Hsien Loong, now in 2014, echoed what Mr. Salmon said. We are significantly reducing the inflow of new arrivals, both immigrants as well as foreign workers. I want you again to keep this in mind, okay? Because this is what PM Lee Hsien Loong was also saying, agreeing to, that we cannot continue this trend that we're on. We have to reduce the number of foreign workers in Singapore. Okay, let me turn now to the cost of living. How is foreign workers present in Singapore affecting our cost of living? There was a report by EdgeProp just a couple of months ago. There were 460 HDB resale flats that were sold for more than $1 million in 2023. Okay? That was 25% higher than the number in 2022. Then there was a survey, I picked this up from, I think it was today, last year, that said that 70% of our youths say they are worried that their children will have difficulty affording a home in Singapore in the future. Let me just try it my next. In addition, 80% said that owning a private home is one of their life goals. Now, with what I just said about homes being sold for more than $1 million, it almost become commonplace. I remember still that the first HDB flat that was sold for more than $1 million, if I'm not mistaken, was either in Bishan or in Queenstown. At that time, jaws dropped. But now 400, 500, hundreds of homes sold for more than $1 million. I would like to ask this question. How many of these homes were bought by PRs? I know that there are a lot of restrictions about PRs buying resale flats. But I'm very curious to know, how many of these are bought by PRs who may have better income and are then driving up prices of HDB resale flats and making outreach for many of our youths? Okay? Again, I come back to this point. I'm not the one saying this. This is coming from a former PAP MP. Mr. Inderjit Singh. Singaporeans will be priced out of the private property market as we continue to see a flood of foreign funds flow into Singapore. I talked about PRs, buying property. This is a whole new level, whole new dimension. You have a Chinese PR, bought all 20 units of the Eden condo. If you drive past where Shangri-La is, just around, I think it was Draycott Hill around there, you see this brownish building, 20 units. One unit will cost you, set you back about $15 million. This guy came, he didn't just buy 1, 2, 3 units, he bought the whole entire condo, okay? And you think he's going to buy for all his relatives to stay? I don't think so. He's going to be offloading and selling it to other people, and thus all raising property prices. Another PR bought an entire floor of Suntec City Tower 2 for a record nearly $40 million. And he's going to be renting it out. And I'm just citing these two examples, but I've heard so many stories of other new citizens and PRs. Deep pockets, deep pockets. One of them, the most recent one, is Jack Ma's wife, right? From Alibaba, Chinese Jack Ma, came to buy 3 units for Duxton shop houses at Duxton Hill, Duxton Road, for $50 million. All this will push up rent, will push up property prices. And you're talking about cost of living that we, citizens here, have to contend with. Okay? And I don't have to tell you, because of rent prices, everything filters down to the price of your goods and services that you have to live with. Okay? The next item, inequality. I just told you a little bit about the 2 condominiums. But on the other hand, in addition to that, you have many of these new citizens, and some PRs, I believe, because they can get special approval. If they can apply for it, and even your PR, and you get approved, you can buy landed property, good class bungalows. Okay? And these bungalows worth $40, $50 million. Many of them. Right from the guy from Hai Di Lao, who bought one for his son as well, and then most recently Mr. Forrest Lee, his daughter bought another one, and then somebody else's wife bought, Gallop Road, Bin Tong Park, you name it. Right? And I think, if not mistaken, Mr. Ma Bao Tan sold his good class bungalow for about $50 million. Okay? And you know that these good class bungalows are all freehold land, so that they can pass on to their children, right, without inheritance tax to root. Right? 80 to 90% of us live in HDB flats. That, at the end of the day, we have to give it back to the government. Now, doesn't that tell you that with income, wealth inequality, and owning of property, we're going to see a disparity, growing disparity in wealth? Again, don't take it from me. This is what Ravi Menon, MAS Managing Director, said. Income from property grows much faster than income from work, and this adds to wealth inequality. This is a development that we should be deeply concerned about. Last item then, national identity. This picture here tells you, paints a million words, right? This is Piyush Gupta, DBS CEO, earns $1 million a month. Last year his salary was 11 point something million dollars. Works out to be about $1 million. On this other side, we have more than 50,000 workers in Singapore. I'm talking about Singaporeans earning $1,300 a month. Many of them, I've just gotten word from one of my residents in Bukit Batok, earning about that, having to push some cardboard just to make a supplement to supplement his daily needs. Okay? And have we become a nation of food delivery and PHV drivers? This is a big concern. Right? Many Singaporeans, that didn't come from me. Even some of the PAP MPs have acknowledged that this might be a problem. And what about national service? Who and what are we defending when we talk about the character of our society changing? Again, if you think that I'm the one that's trying to stir up issues between foreigners and Singaporeans, this is what Mr. Tharman said. A continued rapid infusion of foreign workers will also inevitably affect the Singaporean character of our society. His words, not mine. So even the government is very concerned about how our society functions. And as I said, there was an interview that I think PM Lee Hsien Loong gave, that was reported yesterday, about integrating foreigners into Singaporeans. Be very careful. Be very careful. The United States and Europe are grappling with this issue already, with an unprecedented mass inflow of foreigners in the country, and society is trying to deal with it, even as I speak. So you have these few issues that we are going to be campaigning on, and getting the government to give us concrete answers. I'm going to show you. I just want to remind you of these two statements, right? That Tharman said and that Lee Hsien Loong said. We must therefore take further measures to reduce the inflow of foreign workers. And Lee Hsien Loong saying we are significantly reducing the inflow of new arrivals. Okay, with that in mind, let me show you some statistics. These are statistics taken from, I think, SingStat. All right, it shows you population growth from the year 2000 to 2023, so a lot more than last 2 decades. It's broken up into, you see on the second column, Singapore residents, and then non-residents, which are also AKA your foreigners. And then the next column here is a column for number of PRs, and then Singapore citizens. And then it tracks the change through the years. Okay? If you take a look at this, and I just want to pay you, to pay particular attention to this column of non-residents, foreigners here. And you go down to that last figure in 2023. Okay, I'm going to call this up. All right, that figure there. And if you compare right now, we started off in 2000 about 754,000,000. Right? And you go on right